I am sitting in my apartment right now staring at another text message from my brother asking for money. This is the 14th time this year. My mind drifts back to when I was 17, holding that partial scholarship letter, dreaming about my future. My parents had promised me a college fund since I was 12 years old, $35,000, saved just for my education. But that money never made it to my education. Before I begin this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. If stories about family betrayal and rising above adversity speak to you, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Have you ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you? Stay with me because this story changed everything I believed about family. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and Friday nights revolve around high school football games. My father worked as a plumber running his own small business out of our garage. My mother did part-time accounting work for a few local shops. We were not rich, but we were comfortable. Middle class in every sense of the word. I have an older brother named Derek. He is 4 years older than me, and growing up he was everything I was not. Derek was the star. He played varsity football, had a smile that made teachers forgive his late assignments, and walked through life like the world owed him something good. People gravitated toward him naturally. At family gatherings, relatives would crowd around Derek asking about his games, his girlfriends, his plans. I would sit in the corner with a book, and nobody seemed to notice. I was the quiet one. The kid who preferred the library to the football field. I made honor roll every semester, but my report cards never made it to the refrigerator door. That space was reserved for Derek's trophies and team photos. I told myself it was normal. Oldest children always get more attention, right? That is just how families work. The favoritism showed in small ways that added up over time. Derek got the bigger bedroom when we moved to a new house. Derek got a car for his 16th birthday, while I got a bicycle for mine. Derek could stay out until midnight while my curfew was 10. My parents always had explanations. Derek is older. Derek has more responsibilities. Derek needs the car for practice. I learned to stop questioning and start accepting. When I was 12 years old, my parents sat me down and told me about my college fund. They explained that they had been saving money since I was born, and that my grandparents on both sides contributed every birthday and Christmas. By the time I graduated high school, there would be enough to help pay for a good education. They told me the number, $35,000. To a 12-year-old kid that sounded like a fortune, that promise became my North Star. Every time I felt overlooked or forgotten, I reminded myself that my parents were planning for my future. They cared about me in their own way. The college fund was proof, so I worked hard. I studied late into the night. I joined academic clubs and volunteered for extra credit projects. I did everything right because I believed that education was my ticket out, and my parents were going to help me get there. By the time I was 17, I had applied to several universities and received a partial scholarship from a state school. The scholarship covered 30% of tuition, which meant I still needed significant funds for the remaining costs, plus room and board. But I had done the math. 30% scholarship plus $35,000 in savings would get me through 4 years if I was careful. I was so excited when that acceptance letter arrived. I ran downstairs to tell my parents already, imagining my future. That summer before college was supposed to be the best summer of my life. Instead, it became the summer everything fell apart. My parents called me into the living room one evening in July. The sun was setting outside, casting long shadows through the windows. My father sat in his usual armchair. My mother perched on the edge of the sofa, and Derek was there too, standing by the fireplace with his arms crossed, looking at the floor. Something felt wrong immediately. The air was too heavy, the silence too deliberate. My father cleared his throat and started talking about opportunity, about how sometimes families need to make sacrifices for each other, about how Derek had this incredible business idea, a sporting goods store that could really take off if he just had the startup capital. My mother jumped in her voice high and nervous, explaining that Derek had been planning this for years, that this was his dream, his chance to build something real. I remember the exact moment I understood what they were telling me. My stomach dropped like I had missed a step on a staircase. I asked about my college fund. The room went quiet. My father looked at my mother. My mother looked at Derek. Nobody looked at me. Finally, my father spoke. He said that I had a scholarship, that I could take out student loans like millions of other kids do. He said Derek did not have those options. Derek needed this money now, or his dream would die before it even started. He made it sound so reasonable, so logical, like they were not stealing my future to fund my brother's fantasy. I tried to argue. I told them that money was mine, that my grandparents had given it specifically for my education. I told them I had planned my entire life around that promise. My voice cracked, and I hated myself for it, for showing weakness when I needed to be strong. My mother said something then that I will never forget. She said that family has to help each other, and that Derek would help me too someday when he was successful. She said it like it was already decided, like my opinion did not matter, like I was just a minor obstacle in their plan to rescue their favorite son. Derek never said a word during that entire conversation. He just stood there staring at the floor, letting our parents hand him my future on a silver platter. He did not apologize. He did not promise to pay me back. He did not even look me in the eye. I was 18 years old. I had no money, no power, and no one in my corner. I walked out of that room knowing that something fundamental had broken between me and my family. The people who were supposed to protect me had chosen someone else, and there was nothing I could do about it. That fall, I started college with a heavy load of student loans and a chip on my shoulder the size of Ohio. While my classmates worried about which parties to attend, I worried about how I was going to eat next week. The scholarship covered tuition partially, but everything else fell on me. Books, housing, food, transportation, every dollar had to be accounted for. I got 2 part-time jobs within the first month. Mornings I worked at a coffee shop near campus, waking up at 4:30 a.m. to open the store before my 8 a.m. classes. Evenings I worked as a security guard at the university library, sitting at a desk until midnight checking student identification cards. Between classes, homework, and work, I averaged about 4 to 5 hours of sleep per night, sometimes less. My roommate was a guy named Marcus from Detroit. He came from a similar background, working-class family, no safety net, just determination and grit. We understood each other without having to explain much. When I came back to the dorm exhausted and frustrated, Marcus did not ask questions. He just handed me a cup of instant noodles and let me vent. He became my first real friend, the first person who saw me for who I was, rather than who I was compared to Derek. The exhaustion caught up with me during my second semester. I was working a double shift at the coffee shop covering for a sick coworker when my vision started to blur. The next thing I knew, I was on the floor behind the counter with my manager kneeling over me, calling my name. They took me to the campus health center, where a nurse told me I was severely sleep-deprived and malnourished. She asked if I had anyone to call. I thought about my parents for a moment, then shook my head. I called home a few days later, not to complain, just to hear familiar voices. My mother answered, asked how I was doing, and before I could really respond, she started talking about Derek. The store was doing great, she said. Derek had hired 3 employees. They were thinking about expanding. She talked for 15 minutes about my brother's success, while I sat in my tiny dorm room still dizzy from passing out at work. When she finally asked about me, I said I was fine. What else could I say? Meanwhile, I kept my head down and my grades up. I knew that my degree was the only way out, the only way to build a life that no one could take from me. So I pushed through the exhaustion, the hunger, the loneliness. I told myself it would be worth it someday. During my second year, I went home for Thanksgiving. It was the first time I had been back since that summer night when my parents gave away my future. Part of me hoped things would be different, that maybe some time apart had changed perspectives. I was wrong. Derek picked me up from the bus station in a brand new truck. He talked the whole drive about the store, about his plans, about how business was booming. When we got to town, he insisted on showing me the place before going home. I agreed mostly out of morbid curiosity. The store was located in a strip mall on the edge of town, sandwiched between a nail salon and a vacant storefront. Even from the outside, I could see problems. The parking lot was nearly empty on a Saturday afternoon. The signage looked cheap. When we walked inside, I counted more employees than customers. The shelves were overstocked with inventory that did not seem to be moving. Derek gave me a tour, like he was showing off a palace, completely oblivious to the red flags everywhere. I tried to be diplomatic. I asked about his profit margins, his customer acquisition costs, his inventory turnover rate. Derek looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. He got defensive quickly, telling me that business was not something you learn from books, that I would not understand, because I had never taken a risk in my life. Our parents were there for dinner that night, and when I tried to share my concerns, they shut me down immediately. "Let your brother handle his business," they said. "Focus on your studies." The second major blow came during my third year. I was in the library studying for midterms when my phone rang. It was my father, which was unusual because he rarely called. His voice was tense as he explained that Derek's store was struggling. Sales were down. They needed to cut costs, and they had a solution. He asked if I could take a semester off from school and come work at the store for free. My labor would save them the cost of an employee, he explained. Family helping family, he said. It would just be temporary until things turned around. I could not believe what I was hearing. They had already taken my college fund. Now they wanted me to pause my education, the only thing I had left to bail out a failing business that I had warned them about. I said no. I explained that I was in a critical part of my program, that leaving now would set me back significantly, that I could not afford to lose my scholarships or my work-study position. My father's response was immediate and harsh. He called me selfish. He said I only cared about myself. He said that when Derek's store succeeded, I would come crawling back, asking for handouts, and they would remember this moment. My mother called the next day crying. She said I had hurt my father deeply, that I was tearing the family apart, that Derek was under so much stress, and I was making it worse. She begged me to reconsider. I held my ground, but the guilt ate at me for months afterward. Every time I saw a missed call from home, my stomach turned. After that conversation, the calls became less frequent. Holidays became awkward obligations rather than celebrations. I was slowly becoming a stranger to my own family, and I was not sure if that was a tragedy or a relief. I graduated with honors 4 years later. Against all odds, I had maintained a high grade point average while working 2 jobs, and I had landed a position at a tech company in Austin, Texas. The starting salary was more than my father had ever made in a year. I should have been ecstatic. Instead, I felt hollow. I invited my entire family to the graduation ceremony. I sent them the date weeks in advance, offered to help with travel arrangements, even found a cheap hotel nearby. My mother called 3 days before the event to say they could not make it. The store was in a difficult phase, she explained. Someone needed to be there. Derek could not leave, and they could not leave Derek. I stood alone in a sea of happy families that day. All around me, parents hugged their children, took photographs, wiped tears of pride from their eyes. I watched a father lift his daughter onto his shoulders. I watched a mother pin a flower to her son's gown. I watched siblings high-five and grandparents beam with joy. And I stood there by myself, diploma in hand, wondering why I was not enough. Marcus found me after the ceremony. He had driven 6 hours from his new job in Chicago just to be there. He did not say anything at first. He just stood next to me, solid and present, and put a hand on my shoulder. That small gesture meant more than he probably knew. That night I sat alone in my empty dorm room, all my belongings packed in boxes, and I cried. I cried for the kid who believed his parents when they promised to help him. I cried for the teenager who worked himself to exhaustion to prove he was worthy. I cried for all the birthdays and holidays and ordinary days when I had felt invisible in my own home. And when the tears finally stopped, I made a decision. I was done. I would never again let these people make me feel small. I would never again wait for their approval or their love. I was going to build my own life, and they could either be part of it on my terms or not be part of it at all. 2 years into my career in Austin, I received the call I had been half expecting. Derek's store had officially gone bankrupt. The debts were staggering. He had to sell everything, including his truck and his house. At 32 years old, my brother moved back in with our parents unemployed and broke. My parents did not call to tell me the news. They called to ask for money, $50,000 to help Derek start over, to give him another chance to help the family through this difficult time. There was no greeting, no questions about my life, no acknowledgement that they had not spoken to me in months. Just a request for cash. I asked them a simple question. What happened to the $35,000 you took from me? My father dismissed it immediately. That was years ago, he said. We need to focus on the present, not dwell on the past. My mother chimed in with her usual refrain. I was successful now. I could afford to help. Family takes care of family. I told them the truth. I was still paying off my student loans. Every month, a significant portion of my paycheck went to debt that I never should have had. I did not have $50,000 to spare. Even if I did, I was not sure I would give it to them. The conversation deteriorated quickly. My father accused me of being cold, of changing, of forgetting where I came from. He said I had become arrogant and materialistic, that money had corrupted me. My mother cried and said she did not recognize me anymore. They hung up without saying goodbye. A few days later, Derek called. It was the first time we had spoken directly in years. His voice sounded different, harder somehow, like he was reading from a script. He did not ask how I was doing. He did not apologize for anything. He just explained his situation and asked me to transfer funds, like I was a bank. Like we were not brothers, like my only value was what I could give him. I decided it was time for a real conversation, not over the phone, but face to face. I booked a flight to Ohio. Walking into my childhood home felt surreal. Everything looked smaller than I remembered. The living room where my parents had shattered my dreams was just an ordinary room with worn furniture and faded curtains. My father sat in his armchair, older and grayer than when I had last seen him. My mother perched on the sofa, wringing her hands. Derek stood by the window, arms crossed, jaw clenched. I sat down across from them and I spoke. I spoke calmly and clearly, without raising my voice or losing control. I told them everything. I described the 4 years of working double shifts, surviving on 4 hours of sleep, eating ramen noodles, because I could not afford real food. I told them about the night I collapsed at work, about the nurse who asked if I had anyone to call, about the silence on the other end when I could not answer. I told them about graduation day, about standing alone in the crowd searching for familiar faces that never appeared, about watching other families celebrate while I celebrated with no one, about Marcus, a friend I had known for only a few years, being the only person who cared enough to show up. I told them about the monthly payments I still made on my student loans, about the hole their decision had dug in my financial life, about the years it would take to climb out. I did the math for them right there, showing how their $35,000 gift to Derek had cost me nearly double that in interest and lost opportunities. Then I asked them a question. If the situation had been reversed, if Derek had been the one with the college fund and I had been the one with the business idea, would they have taken his money and given it to me? The room went silent. My father looked at the floor. My mother opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Derek turned away and stared out the window. That silence told me everything I needed to know. I stood up and spoke my final piece. I told them that I did not hate them. I was not angry anymore. but I would not give them money, not because I was selfish or heartless, but because I had learned the hard way that the only person who would protect my future was me. I had built my life from nothing after they took everything, and I refused to tear down what I had built to fix someone else's mistakes. Derek interrupted me then. He said I was lucky that I got to go to college while he had to struggle in the real world, that I did not understand how hard it was to run a business. I looked at him with something close to pity. I asked him if he thought I was lucky. I worked over 100 hours every week for 4 years. I watched my classmates enjoy their youth while I fought for survival. No one handed me anything. Everything I have I earned. My mother started crying. My father sat frozen in his chair. I walked to the door and turned back one last time. I told them that I loved them, but that I would not set my own life on fire to keep someone else warm. Then I left. The flight back to Austin felt different, lighter somehow, like I had been carrying an invisible weight for years and had finally set it down. For so long I had been waiting for my family to acknowledge what they had done, to apologize, to make things right. That confrontation forced me to accept that the apology might never come and that I had to find peace anyway. The first few months were hard. I second-guessed myself constantly. Had I been too harsh, should I have given them the money? Late at night I would picture my mother's face streaked with tears and wonder if I was the villain in this story. But then I would remember all the nights I worked until I could barely stand, all the meals I skipped to pay bills, all the moments I was invisible to the people who should have loved me most. And I knew I had made the right choice. I threw myself into work and excelled. My managers noticed my dedication and promoted me twice in 18 months. My salary increased substantially. I started paying extra on my student loans, watching the balance drop faster than projected. I made friends at the office, good people who invited me to dinners and weekend trips, who celebrated my successes and supported me through failures. I built a family of choice to replace the family of blood that had failed me. Marcus remained my closest friend. We talked every week, sometimes about serious things, sometimes just about sports or movies or nothing at all. He was the brother I should have had. Loyal, honest, present. He never asked for anything except my friendship, and he gave me his without conditions. About 6 months after my confrontation with my family, my mother started calling again. The first few calls I let go to voicemail. But something in her voice sounded different, softer, sadder. When I finally answered, she did not ask for money. She asked how I was doing. She asked about my job, my apartment, my life. She let me talk without interrupting or steering the conversation toward Derek. Over the following months, our relationship slowly began to shift. My mother called regularly, and the conversation started to feel almost normal. One day she said something I never expected to hear. She admitted that taking my college fund had been wrong. She said she had known it at the time, but had convinced herself it was for the greater good. She said she was sorry. I did not know how to respond. I thanked her for saying it. I told her it meant a lot. But I also told her that the apology did not erase the consequences, that I was still living with the results of that decision. She understood. She did not argue or make excuses. She just said she wished she could go back and do things differently. My father never apologized. I doubt he ever will. But he stopped calling me selfish. He stopped demanding money. When we talked, which was rare, he kept the conversation brief and civil. That was probably the best I could hope for. Derek eventually found a job as a sales associate at a retail chain. Nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills. He moved out of our parents' house and into a small apartment. Once in a while he would text me asking for money, and I would decline. But the requests became less frequent over time, and sometimes he would text just to say hello or share a memory from childhood. Our relationship was not close, but it was no longer hostile. One evening, about a year after my confrontation, Derek called me. I expected another loan request. Instead, he said 2 words, "I am sorry." Then he hung up before I could respond. It was not much. It was not enough to undo years of damage. But it was something. A crack in the wall between us, a sign that maybe someday we could be brothers again. Today, I am 32 years old. I earn a six-figure salary at a job I love. Last year, I made my final student loan payment and cried when I saw the zero balance. I own my apartment. I drive a reliable car. I take vacations, save for retirement, and donate to charities that help first-generation college students. My life is stable and peaceful, and entirely my own. I visit my family once or twice a year, usually for major holidays. We are cordial, but not close. There is too much history, too many old wounds that never fully healed. But we have found a kind of equilibrium. I set boundaries, and they mostly respect them. We talk about safe topics and avoid the landmines. It is not the family I dreamed of as a child, but it is the family I have, and I have learned to accept it for what it is. Derek still asks for money sometimes. Last week, I received a text message from him asking if I could lend him a few $1,000s for car repairs. I smiled when I read it, not because I enjoyed his struggle, but because his request no longer had power over me. The guilt and obligation that once would have consumed me simply did not appear. I typed back a simple reply. I wrote that I could not lend him the money, but I hoped he was doing okay. I meant it. I do hope he figures his life out. I hope my parents find happiness in their final years. I hope we all find peace with the choices we have made. But I will not sacrifice my well-being to make that happen. That is not selfishness. That is survival. The greatest lesson I learned from this experience is that family is important, but so is self-respect. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot light yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally will put conditions on that love, and you have to decide whether to meet those conditions or walk away. I chose to walk away, and it saved my life. I am sitting in my apartment right now looking out at the city lights. My phone buzzes with another message from Derek. I already know what it says without looking. Can you lend me some money? I set the phone down and turn back to the window. The answer is no. It will always be no. And I am finally at peace with that. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is say no. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but out of love for yourself. Boundaries are not walls. They are doors that open only for those who have earned the key. My family lost that key a long time ago, and while I hope they find it again someday, I will not leave my door unlocked in the meantime. If you are watching this and you have experienced something similar, please know that you are not alone. Families are complicated. Love can coexist with disappointment. You can honor where you came from while still protecting where you are going. You do not owe anyone your future, not even the people who gave you your past. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to say no to family to protect yourself? How did you handle it? Drop your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and this community is full of people who understand what you are going through. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like. It helps more people find these videos and share their own experiences. Subscribe to this channel if you want to hear more stories about overcoming adversity and finding your own path. And share this video with someone who might need to hear it today. You never know who is struggling in silence with the same battles you have already won. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. I hope you find the strength to set your own boundaries, the courage to enforce them, and the peace that comes from knowing your worth. Take care of yourself. You deserve it.